welcome to ESI Africa. Today we are joined by Ben Brimble, who is the Business Development Manager at Seriti Green. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So in terms of grid access and the incorporation of renewable energy in South Africa, what are the potential challenges and solutions that you see?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the million-dollar question, really. It's all about grid access in this country at the moment. I mean, to be clear, it's the big thing in any market around the world. It's this integrating of renewable energy into the grid, into the national grid. It's very challenging for a number of reasons, but in this country, you know, the transmission network is really built around evacuating power from Mpumalanga, where all the coal plants are, you know, to the load center, which is Johannesburg, and then down to the Western Cape. So you've got this big backbone, which is very well suited for you know, the historical kind of coal plants that you find in this country. But as wind farms and solar farms have been added to the grid, the current sort of grid infrastructure isn't really fit for purpose, you know, to some degree. So a wind farm in the Northern Cape or the Eastern Cape, you know, that location doesn't necessarily suit the current grid infrastructure. So we, you know, to be honest, we require significant infrastructure upgrades. You know, we need a lot of money to be invested into the grid in this country. There's a lot of talk on that. A lot of stuff is happening, but it does take time. You know, to build out the infrastructure we need, we think will take 5 to 7 years, and that needs to happen before, you know, additional wind farms and solar farms are added to the grid in the Cape provinces. So those are the areas that are very constrained. It's a big issue, and it's probably the biggest impediment to adding more renewable energy megawatts to the grid quickly. I think another way of viewing this is projects need to move into areas where there's existing grid infrastructure. So in Mpumalanga, you know, the Free State, KZN, these are areas that do have grid, and so I really, you know, developers and IPPs should be incentivized to move into these areas and away from sort of the Cape provinces where historically all these wind farms are located. So if that can happen, that would free up capacity. We also, you know, to my point earlier, we need this investment into the grid infrastructure. Another very quick win to add more megawatts to the grid would be for Eskom to change their view on curtailment. So, you know, if they were prepared to curtail solar during certain parts of the day, that would then allow wind farms to be added to the grid in that supply node. So you could have solar and wind coexisting next to each other. So there are various ways of looking at this problem. It's a significant problem, but everyone's aware of it, and I think industry, Eskom, various industry organizations are working together to fix it as quickly as we can.
Mm-hmm. And then in terms of project preparation for these wind projects, what do you think are the environmental issues that are top of mind, and how do you think Seriti Green is trying to overcome these?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So look, I mean, the EIA process, so that's the environmental impact assessment process in this country, is it's sophisticated. It's a very well-run, well-legislated process, and every wind farm needs to go through the EIA process before it can, you know, enter into construction. So, you know, there are very stringent rules we need to adhere to before we can construct. I think front of mind at the moment is really cumulative impacts, so cumulative visual impact, and then also cumulative noise impact. You know, what's happening is wind farms tend to congregate in certain areas for two reasons, namely there's access to the grid, so perhaps there's a substation there, and then secondly, it's windy, there's a good resource. So if you have those two factors coexisting, you're going to find a lot of wind farms in that area. And what that means is you do get these cumulative impacts, and it's really how us as an industry manage that. We manage those expectations and deal with it. I think that's sort of something we really need to get our heads around, because one wind farm by itself is manageable, but if you are an adjacent landowner or an adjacent farmer, and there's, you know, suddenly 4 or 5 wind farms around you, you know, that's potentially something we need to deal with. So, you know, I think that's front of mind. The other impacts really are manageable. You know, bird and bat impact is very well known. It's well communicated, well spoken of, and we do significant work during development, i.e. pre-construction, to mitigate those impacts. and really the impacts are during operation are quite low. So I think for us really it's those cumulative impacts and how we deal with that kind of going forward.
Mm-hmm. And from your perspective then, why do you think it's important to prepare for cradle to grave aspect of the projects?
Yeah, look, that's a good question. It's very much front of mind in sort of more mature markets, so Europe, and I know in Australia it's very much a question that's asked a lot. So we're not quite there yet, but it's something we're starting to grapple with as an industry. And I think really the way we're doing that is, there are a few ways we're looking at it. Number one is, blades are able to be recycled. So, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, that wasn't the case. OEMs, so that's turbine suppliers, are now realizing that if their blades can't be recycled, it's really going to put them on the back foot, and you're going to make them less competitive compared to their peers. And so it's becoming normal for wind turbine components, including the blades, to be recycled to some degree. And I think advancements in that area will continue to happen. Secondly, as responsible developers, you should be setting aside a very significant decommissioning fund, and same as what they do in the mining area. So a mine, in order for a mine to operate, it needs a decommissioning fund in place, and that is money set aside that cannot be touched until the mine, or in this case the wind farm, is decommissioned, and those funds can then be drawn on to assist with decommissioning. So that's something us as responsible developers do. And it allows us to know that when the wind farm is decommissioned, it will be done so responsibly. And then third, I think we really need to get our heads around how long these wind farms will be operational for. So normally in this country, PPAs are kind of 20 years in duration, but really that can be extended very easily to 25 or even 30 years. So although wind farms will eventually be decommissioned, I think that can't be avoided. I really think the first prize should be to re-energize and get as much use out of these wind turbines as you can. So if they're installed, if they're operational, at 20 years, find a new PPA, a new off-taker, you re-energize, and you can get a decent another 5 to 10 years out of that product. So I think we'll see a world where wind farms will operate for a minimum of 30 years, because after 10 to 15 years, it's debt-free, it's providing clean, green energy to the grid, and there's really no reason why those turbines shouldn't carry on operating for as long as they can. So I think those are the kind of three aspects we're looking at, but it very much is something the industry is aware of. It's very much front of mind in the media, and I think we all understand we need to get our heads around it and fully understand it if we want to be a sustainable and sort of responsible industry.
Well, this has been very insightful, so thank you so much, Ben, for talking to us today and letting us pick your brain a little bit.
No, thank you. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
And to our viewers, thank you for watching. This has been ESI Africa.